Hi everyone, Sajid Amit here and welcome to my review of all my IEMs. That's right, you've heard me right. I'm going to talk about all my IEMs, but it's not going to be a super long video because I'm going to focus on only the weaknesses of my IEMs. Because a lot of times I feel like, I drop impressions here and there and I nitpick about some IEM that I like. Otherwise, let's say for example, I'm nitpicking something about the Empire Ears Odin, which is one of my top 2 IEMs. But, recently I had a guy come at me for saying, this has these sorts of, tonal issues, what have you. And the gentleman was, this is a perfect IEM. And this is not the first time or the last time that I'm dealing with this sort of idea that there are perfect IEMs out there. So to my mind, there's no single perfect IEM, DAP, headphone, DAC, amplifier, anything. Nothing is perfect. Life is not perfect, so neither are IEMs. So in this video, I'm going to take you guys through all my stuff. So I'm going to talk about my entire collection. And I think I have roughly 15 or 14 IEMs right now. So all these IEMs here will get talked about. The wonderful Madoo, which perhaps is the closest to perfection that I've ever heard. So this will get its own review, so I'm not going to spoil too much about this. I'll talk about the Dita Perpetua, which I have over here. The Fir Audio XE6, which again is an amazing IEM. The Odin, of course, which is one of my favorites of all time. The Maestro Mini. I mean, I have the KR5. So everything that I have, guys, will get talked about, but I'll be brief because I'll only be talking about weaknesses. All right, starting with the stuff that I have in this case. First and foremost, this is perhaps my number 1 favorite, my top IEM, and this is none other than the Aroma Jewel. So Aroma Audio is a high-end brand, and I've met them in Singapore, and I'm soon going to be reviewing the Aroma Air, which is this portable source that Aroma has made and is doing pretty well, and I was really keen to get it in. So this is mostly a neutral take on a flagship sort of a sound, and I got this after I bought the Trailey, and the reason I bought it was because as soon as I bought the Trailey, a lot of my Summit Fire friends, so to speak, suggested that I try out the Jewels, because they said that if you like the Trailey, you're going to like the Jewel, and this was true, and some opined that I might like the Jewel more, and that was the case. I do think the Jewels are better for me insofar as their dynamic driver bass is concerned, and this has slightly more treble energy than the Oriolus Trailey did, so I did end up liking this more. The major nitpick that I have, the reason why this is not a perfect IEM and it still needs EQ of my Sony WM1ZM2 DAP, the Sony WM1ZM2 DAP is my source, my preferred source for all these IEMs. I also own a Hugo 2. The WM1ZM2 is the best digital audio player on the planet. And I've heard mostly everything with the exception of the LP6 from Luxury Precision, so take that for what that's worth. But then even the Sony WM1ZM2 might be the best, but it has flaws. It requires an upper mids boost for it to sound more balanced. Otherwise, it's a bit too dark, but it's still the best. Not the stock version, perhaps. I think stock tuning wise, the other adapts that I think are perhaps better. But that EQ is just so easily done and is permanent if you want to leave it at that setting. So that is why I think it's the best with that EQ. That being said, I need to EQ this IEM, especially on the treble, for this to come alive like I think it should, like it ought to sound. So for that reason, especially in around 4 to 6K, it lacks a bit of lower treble energy, and that's the major weakness this has. So by that account, it is not a perfect IEM. All right, next up is one of my current favorites, the Dita Perpetua. So this cable you see with the Dita Perpetua is a very fancy cable that I bought from this trip to Singapore. It's from Noble Audio. It's a lovely cable. It's from the Noble Prestige series, and I got a nice discount on it, but it pairs well with my Dita Perpetua. The Dita is a single dynamic driver. It's priced around $3,000, but it's really premium materials. They use a lot of the Kondo Audio Note Silver cabling inside, wiring inside, and it's made of titanium and all that. But the aesthetics and build quality aside, they sound magnificent. What I really like about them is their treble and their bass and their mids and their soundstage. I like everything about these guys. So these are as close to perfection as it gets. They're amazing timbrally, and I'll be dropping a full review on this. But if I had to nitpick one thing that I think is perhaps not the best about them, aside from the fact that the cable that it comes with is beautiful but not as ergonomic, see, I'm struggling to find a fault with this. That's how much I like this. But I do think that for this price of $3,000, you could get IEMs that are more resolving. I paid my money for this because of the tonality and the timbre. I'm a huge timbre head. I can like IEMs that are not the best timbrely, but in this case, I was really taken in. I was really smitten with the timbre here. But if I had to nitpick, I would say that the resolution on this for $3,000 could have been better. Single dynamic driver, that could be, a caveat that one often, points to with a lot of single DDs. The 2-reed TI titanium also is an amazing single dynamic driver IEM, which wasn't for me because tuned too bright for my tastes. And that again is also not as resolving as a lot of other monitors. They're in the same price range. So yeah, so that's sort of my nitpick with this. The Empire Ears Odins, which is possibly in my top 2 along with the Aroma Audio Jewel. The Odins have had tremendous staying power compared to a lot of the flavor of the month flagships that people rave about and then very quickly relegate to the dustbin of history. The Odins are amazing. I've been driving this with the first times non-shielding cable from PW Audio. So these are my Odins, and these are amazing IEMs. This has been a while since they've come out. I still love them, and I feel like a lot of people still own them, and as they should. This has just some of the most amazing technicalities ever. Great soundstage, imaging, very airy treble, very textured and high quality bass, a lovely transparent mid-range. The word transparent comes to mind when I talk about the Odins. Again, if I had to nitpick, I think my main complaint about this would be that on certain DAPs, it can be very synergy sensitive. Like, it doesn't really synergize well with my Sony WM1ZM2, as amazing as that DAP is. I love it on the Hugo 2, however. So timbre can be an issue here with the wrong synergy, or not the right synergy in that sense, because there's no wrong synergy because of as such. It's all relative. But the timbre can be an issue on certain chains, and the upper mids can be shouty for some on certain chains and with certain kinds of cables and tips. So yeah, the upper mids, the lower treble can be somewhat a bit too alive for some people. So that's sort of my nitpick with the Odins, but it's amazing. And like I said, it's probably my number 2. My number 1 is probably still the Aroma Audio Jewel that I just showed you. All right, the Fir Audio Xenon 6, one of my current favorites, and I love this. I bought this with my own money. The first time I checked these out, I wasn't a huge fan because I thought that there was too much mid bass. There was this fat mid bass bloat that I thought made the whole presentation muddy and thick and just cumbersome and just not my cup of tea. Fast forward to CanJam Singapore, and I tried the Xenon 6 with these Mandarin Symbio tips, these orange tips that you might be able to see right here. See how beautiful the shells are. I mean, these guys, Bogdan and Vlad, who have moved over from 64 Audio to form their own company, they've essentially, parted ways with their brothers at 64 Audio for this company. And from what I understand, they're the brains and the innovators were the innovators from 64 Audio. So now they brought all the innovation to this brand, which is why you see crazy innovations like kinetic bass, this sort of, amazing bass response that they have, which uses both bone conduction and air conduction. Amazing IEM. And the Symbio Mandarin tips do fix the mid-bass spread for me. That you see the tips here. That said, you need the tips, right, to fix them. So otherwise, it is a very bloated and sort of like cumbersome and honestly not a very pleasant mid bass with the stock tips. So that's the major nitpick I have with them. Even with this fix that I have found with these tips, while it's amazing in terms of its presentation and technical performance, some people might still consider the vocals to be overly thick and lush and less reference. If you're looking for reference sound, this is not your jam. So in that, this is Imperfect. All right, other Imperfect stuff that I own. The Fir Audio KR5. Now the KR5 is one IEM that I've had the least amount of listening time with. It is slightly on the more brighter side compared to the Xenon 6. It is also very punchy and impactful, and in that, I just love it. But I've heard people who have complained about the treble. So that's worth keeping in mind. And I've heard people who've also complained about the mid-bass spread on this. So it does have its flaws, and it still needs the Mandarin tips, I think, to bring out its best sound. The Mandarin Symbiote tips, in my experience, have elevated the sound quality from each and every Fir Audio IEM that I've heard. I've heard the Xenon 6. I thought it was amazing, but it was halfway housed between the KR5 and the Xenon 6, and I thought I would rather own the other two because I like covering a wider palette, and owning these two made sense for me. All right. The Vision Ears VE7 is an amazing IEM, and it's not a new IEM. Vision Ears has several other IEMs that have superseded this as an upgrade to this. I have a matching cable here. I think it looks nice. The cable is made by a DIY maker. They're really pretty, and I love the mid-range of Vision Ears. They're traditionally a brand that does some of the best mid-range in the business. BA bass, however, and it can sound like BA bass. I do EQ this, and somehow off my Sony DAB, the magic DAB that I keep talking about, bass is elevated and it sounds more natural and a little more decay I feel like I get from this bass, which makes it sound a little more dynamic driver-like, but it does have its weaknesses, and it does require some EQ to fix the bass. So that's that. What else? The Sennheiser IE900, which is a champion of an IEM for its price. It has had a huge cult following, a lot of sales in Asia. I've even saw the number, and it was just striking in terms of how many units Sennheiser sold of the IE900. Some people like the i600 more, which I don't understand. I think it's because the mid-range forwardness of the i600 some people like because they think it's more intimate. Well, it is a definitive step above the 600 in terms of technical performance. I love the tonality. It's V-shaped, I know, but I love the spaciousness. And on certain DAPs, I can bring out the mid-range, so that fixes the mid-range, so to speak. Love this IEM. It's one of my favorite IEMs, guys. Price no up. I mean, across any price range. But it is not a perfect IEM because it can sound a bit thin in the mid-range. It can sound a bit recessed in the mid-range on a lot of sources. And it can be bright to people who are treble sensitive. So in that, it is not a perfect IEM. I also want to talk about the Sony IER-Z1R, a classic, a mouthful, chunky shells, which has been divisive somewhat in the hobby, but it's still like a legend, honestly. Some people will still swear by this, and a lot of people still will rank this in their top 10, even guys who have heard the $5,000 flagship, some of which I've already talked about, and even guys who own some of these flagships, and many of these flagships will still have this in their collection because it's that good. But it does have flaws. Its mid-range is a bit recessed, and on the wrong sources, the mid-range can sound dry. It does have a bit of a treble peak, especially in around the air frequencies, and with the wrong source, it can be a bit piercing. I found it a bit piercing on the wrong source, so that's that. I currently use it with my Sony WM1ZM2 DAP, and I think there's an amazing synergy that goes on with the DAP and this IEM. But I do EQ. I bring out the upper mids a bit forward, and then I feel like it's a much better IEM. So this does require some fixing, hence not a perfect IEM. The Noble Audio Sultans are another IEM that I own and I love. The Sultans are just amazing. They are the Sultans of swing, of rock, of vocals. I find them lush. I find them, impactful and punchy. Again, they are an IEM that's very close to perfection for me, for my tastes. I love how they sound. I love their technical performance. I love their tonality. So this to me is very close to being perfect. If I had to nitpick, I would say that there's a bit of a lower treble peak, which have, offended some people or just rubbed people the wrong way. Not me. I like it. But yeah, there are other IEMs that are more resolving, etc., etc. So that's that. The 64 Audio TR Trio is a lovely set, perhaps my favorite from the 64 Audio lineup. I did have some listening time with the Forte Blank, and the Forte Blank I felt could be my favorite if I had it for longer. I don't currently own it. I might try getting it in at some point. I do think I like it more than the original Forte because it's got this bass foundation that is a bit stronger than the original Forte. But that said, I love the TR Trio for what it does. It's a fairly dynamic set. It's punchy. It's got a lovely mid-range. And it's overall a very well-tuned set, guys. However, if I had to nitpick flaws about this, and I think this is true for a lot of 64 Audio IEMs, this has this sort of softness in its transients and softness in the sort of edges around notes. that just makes it feel a bit mushy sometimes. And I love female vocals on this for that reason, but it does have the 6 Fir Audio house sound, which can be off-putting some people. And there's a bit of wonkiness in the mid-range and in the treble and all that. So yeah, so there are things to nitpick about this as well. The Oriolus Szalayi is a wonderful IEM that I've often used to go on walks because it does have a profound bass, a profound sub bass. It has a lovely mids. But if I had to nitpick, guys, on certain tips, the sub bass can be a bit much. So you do have to tip roll to find the right balance of sub bass, I feel. And I feel like this also does not have the most, energetic treble. And sometimes you do require a bit more treble presence than what this affords. So those are nitpicks, but it's incredible for the price, guys. And this is flying under the radar. And I highly, highly recommend this as a Szalayi. If you like bass and mids, and if you don't care about a whole lot of treble energy, this would be your jam. Guys, I've covered each and every IEM in my collection right now. All these IEMs are IEMs I own, bought with my own money. I've had no incentive to hype one up or talk one down whatsoever. Like I said, they're my own IEMs. The only IEM that I've not showed you yet, which is not my most expensive IEM, it's called the Madoo. The Madoo is priced around 900 Singaporean dollars if I'm not mistaken. It is not a Singaporean company, unlike, let's say, the Symphonium Helios, which I own, which I've reviewed and dropped review on my channel. I still own it. It's somewhere there. I'm not showing it in my review yet. It's not a perfect IEM. Symphonium Helios could benefit from, let's say, a little more lower mid-range and all that. But it's a wonderful IEM, Symphonium Helios. That's a Singaporean brand, the Helios, the Symphonium rather. The Dita that I talked about is a Singaporean brand. Right here. This is a Japanese brand, and from the same guys behind Acustune or Acustune. So Acustune is a Japanese brand that makes some really funky looking IEMs, which are often funky sounding. And some guys associated with Acustune came out with this brand, the Madoo. The Madoo is just effing incredible. Guys, it's 900 Singaporean dollars. It's probably roughly around 700 US dollars. But if you had told me that these are 1500 US dollars, I would have believed you. This will get its own review. The Madoos are just some of the most amazing IEMs I've ever heard, and I can't hype them enough. I just hope they get the attention that they deserve. If I have a perfect set of IEMs, it's the Madoos. Because they're punchy, they have lower mid-range, the vocals sound lush. I can listen to vocals all day with this. It's got treble, but it's never bright. It's resolving. It's wide. It's dynamic. It's fast. And timbrally, it's also very impressive. So I can't find flaws with the Madoo. The Madoo might be my favorite IEM right now, although it's certainly not the most technical. So that's about it. That's just a quick rundown of every IEM that I happen to own, and I thought you'd appreciate hearing what I think about them, and none of them are perfect, with the exception of the Madoo. I'm only partially kidding, guys. I mean, the Madoo, of course, is not as resolving as my other IEMs that I have, so in that sense, yes, it's not perfect. But nothing is perfect, guys. That's what I'm getting at. Nothing is perfect. IEMs are amazing, and they're getting better and better, and in some ways, I feel like there's more innovation happening in the world of IEMs and in the world of headphones. So I'm very grateful that I've discovered IEMs after a long stint with the headphone section of the hobby. I still review headphones, and I will here and there. Stay tuned for my Atrium closed review that's coming up and all that. But I do want to say that IEMs are amazing. I love IEMs. I love DAPs. But by no means are they infallible or perfect. Not a single one that I own or any one in the market out there. So that's also by way of a systems update that I hope, was mildly interesting for you to, witness. It was certainly interesting for me to talk about. If you want more videos of like these where I cover multiple stuff, drop me a line, let me know. I'd love to engage you in the comments and elsewhere. If you like this video, give it a like. Subscribe to my channel if you have not, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye-bye.